I personally know someone who claims that they are not a feminist because they believe that both men and women should have equal right and equal opportunities. This led to me realizing that so many people out there are actually against feminism because they don't know what it actually means. Instead, their whole perception of feminism is based on what they assume feminism to be. Hi guys, this is Emmy, and welcome to the second episode of Who Does She Think She Is, the podcast where we understand the patriarchy, understand who benefits from it, and dismantle it, all with a side of tea. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about the feminist theory. But to understand the feminist theory, it is crucial for us to first know what feminism means. And as I was saying, people often confuse feminism with misandry. This happens because when we talk about misogyny, misogyny places men on the higher pedestal. It means that men are superior. And when we talk about anything that counters misogyny, people assume it automatically places women higher on the pedestal and that women are superior. But that is wrong. Feminism does not mean that women are superior. Instead, it means the equality of sexes, politically, socially, economically, and personally. It says that no person is superior or inferior to any other person based on their genders. It is so crucial to understand feminism because before we dive into feminist theory, because feminist theory simply takes feminism and it applies it to study society. It studies gender inequality and how it happens and where it shows up in politics, media, literature, psychology, and even history. Feminist theory is feminism applied to study inequality. Feminist theory focuses on questioning inequality and why it exists. That is why feminist theory and feminism they are like very deeply intertwined and they're both like theories which have evolved from activism. To understand it better, we should like take a look into the history of how both of these have evolved. A very easy way of understanding the evolution of both feminism and feminist theory is of thinking of each phase as waves. Each came with its own goals and challenges. In total, there are four waves. The first wave of feminism began in the 19th century and early 20th centuries. Back then, we know women had very few rights. They weren't allowed to vote, they weren't allowed to buy property, and they were denied education. So, first wave feminists, they fought for basic legal equality, especially the right to vote. One of the most prominent figures of this time is Susan B. Anthony, who tirelessly campaigned for women's suffrage in the United States. You walk through into a town hall full of people and you're upfront told that your opinion doesn't matter because of your gender. That is precisely what women faced back then. Of course, thankfully, all of these efforts did lead to major victories, like the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting women the right to vote in the United States. Fast forward to the 1960s and through the 1980s. The second wave emerged now. This wave wasn't just about voting anymore. Women wanted equality in work, education, and in personal life. They wanted control over their own bodies and choices. Before this wave, many women couldn't easily access birth control or abortion. Workplace discrimination was so common, and women working in so called male jobs was almost unheard of. Second wave feminists, they pushed back, they demanded equal pay, and they demanded better workplace conditions and legal protections. Writers like Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique and questioned the idea that women could only find fulfillment as wives and mothers. This wave also brought attention to domestic violence, something that previously had been invisible in public discussions. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the third wave emerged in response that to the belief or perception that earlier feminism focused mainly on the experiences of white middle class women. So, third wave feminists, they aimed to include everyone, women of color, LGBTQ plus women, and women from different classes and cultures. They challenged gender stereotypes and celebrated individualities. For example, the idea that women must be quiet, submissive, or nurturing was questioned during the third wave. This wave also embraced pop culture, music, and fashion as tools to express feminist ideas. That is why, like, here is when you started seeing magazines, movies, and music lyrics encouraging women to take control of their own lives. Today, we're in the fourth wave of feminism. This wave is fueled by internet and social media. It focuses on digital activism, global feminism, and intersectionality. Intersectionality is a very interesting topic, which we will cover later in the branches of feminism. But hashtags like Me Too and Time's Up have made issues like sexual harassment and abuse impossible to ignore. Now that we're done with talking about its history, the history of both feminism and feminist theory, let's talk about the branches of feminist theory. So, branches, they're a little tricky, but to like, I'm gonna try to explain this like as simply as I can because I found it tricky. But inequality exists in different forms, like different people face inequality differently. So that's why there are different branches of feminist theory, and each branch it like explores one cause of inequality. It explores how to get rid of it. None of them cancel each other out. They just explain like the same big picture. When we go into the actual branches, it becomes a lot more clearer. So let's go into it. The first branch of feminism is called liberal feminism. Liberal feminism focuses on equal rights, legal reform, and individual freedom. It argues that women are disadvantaged because of discriminatory laws, policies, and social norms, not biology. So this branch of feminist theory, liberal feminism, it says that inequality exists, people face inequality because of unfair laws. So it will aim to get rid of those unfair laws and, have fair laws take its place, and it would be this branch's way of getting equality. So the key goals of liberal feminism are to sustain equal pay, equal education, voting rights, and workplace equality. The equal pay movement and laws like the Equal Pay Act of 1963, they are some of the accomplishments of liberal feminism, which aim to give women the same opportunities and wages as men through policy change and legal reform. So this whole like branch works on the like legal place, it's the it's everything related to law. The second branch is called radical feminism, and this is the one that it resonates with me the most. Radical feminism argues that patriarchy, a system where men hold power, is the root cause of women's oppression. So this branch, radical feminism, says that inequality isn't just about unfair laws, it's about the systems that are embedded into the society itself. And this is kind of what we're doing right now, What we're doing right now is like largely associated with radical feminism because we're questioning the patriarchy. So the key focuses of radical feminism would be gender roles, family structures, and control over women's bodies. The creation of battered women's shelters in the 1970s are some like real life examples, real life accomplishments of obtained through radical feminism, which highlight the social structures that needed to change to protect women from domestic violence. So the next branch of the feminist theory is called Marxist slash socialist feminism. Now, this branch is a little confusing, but it connects gender inequality to economic systems, particularly capitalism. It highlights how women's work, domestic labor, caregiving, emotional labor is essential but undervalued. So, this branch it says that women face inequality because their labor, the work they do is so essential, yet it is like overlooked and highly undervalued. The key focuses of socialist feminism are unpaid domestic labor, reproductive labor, and economic dependence. The real life, accomplishments that we got from socialist feminisms is advocacy for paid paternal leave and recognition of domestic work as valuable in GDP calculations. All of this emphasizes economic justice as part of gender equality. The next branch of feminist theory that we have here is intersectional feminism. Now, this comes under the whole term of intersectionality, which is really interesting, and I said before that we'd talk more about it later on, so here we are. Intersectional feminism reminds us that gender is not the only factor shaping inequality. This term, intersectionality, was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989, and what it means is that intersectionality means that inequality is not just, restricted by gender, but instead gender interacts with race, class, sexuality, disability, nationality, and religion. And all of this is like what shapes how a person faces inequality. For example, a poor woman and a rich woman, they face inequality differently. The struggles of a straight woman are not the same as the struggles from a woman from the LGBTQ plus community. So the movements like Say Her Name movement are like some accomplishments of intersectional feminism, which highlight the police violence against black women, shows that experiences of sexism and racism often overlap and that they cannot be separated. The next branch is called cultural feminism, and this focuses on valuing traits traditionally associated with women, like empathy, nurturing, and emotional awareness, rather than seeing them as weak. So, this branch says that we should not see feminine traits as weak, but instead we should, value them as well. Some real life examples, accomplishments of this would be campaigns or workplaces emphasizing emotional labor and caregiving, showing that traditionally feminine skills are essential and valuable. The next branch is of feminist theory is postmodern feminism, and this branch, postmodern feminism, it challenges the assumption about gender. It argues that gender is socially constructed and that there is no single universal female experience. So everyone faces all of this, like inequality in gender, in like totally different ways. This is what postmodern feminism says. Some real life examples of this would be shows like Orange is the New Black, which explore diverse women's identities and experiences, illustrating that gender norms are not fixed but culturally created. So that was a wrap on the branches of feminist theory and its history. So that was pretty intense, but now let's talk about why it's still very important, why feminist theory still has great importance today. And I think it's pretty like simple and clear because we know that gender inequality hasn't disappeared. We talked about that. It's just changed shapes. Maybe it wasn't as flashy now as it was before, but it definitely still is there. Pay gaps, underrepresentation, policing of bodies, and biased media portrayals, they still exist, even in today's society, which claims to be equal. And we also know from the intersectional feminist theory that all people don't face inequality in the same way. So, all in all, we know that feminist theory helps us recognize unfair systems and challenge these systems and these harmful norms and helps us to create a space where all genders can thrive. And since we haven't yet accomplished this in today's world, we still need feminist theory because this shows us the way. This shows us how to do all of that. So that is why it is still so important in today's world. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, even though it was a little tense. Stay tuned for the next one, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye!